A barrier is something that gets in the way. It's an obstacle, a limit. There are many external barriers to professional success, but today I'd like to talk to you about internal barriers and how I broke the barriers in my path to fearless. Now, for the record, fearless doesn't mean that I'm not afraid. Fearless means that I'm afraid to do something and I do it anyway in spite of that fear. Fearless is when I go over, under, and around barriers to get to the next level. I'm fearless when I try new things. Fearless is when I feel uncomfortable. As a young information management professional, I was often forced to step out of my comfort zone. Isn't that what it means to be young? You try something new, you make a mistake, you learn, and then you move on. I was fortunate enough to work for someone who encouraged me to jump out of the pan and into the fire. My first business lunch was with the managing partner of what was then one of the big 8 accounting firms. I was so terrified my hands were shaking. So much so that when I went to cut a cherry tomato, it flew right off of my plate and onto his shoe. I knew things can only get better. I learned 2 things during that business lunch. First, even though I was young and inexperienced, I had more knowledge about my craft than he did. I successfully negotiated that business deal. The second thing I learned was to steer clear of cherry tomatoes. I negotiated that deal despite being afraid, despite my youth and inexperience, and despite my social gaffe. I wasn't perfect that day, but I was good enough. I knew next time I would be better. As the years went by, I honed my information management skills. My next big challenge came when I was offered a partnership in the business that I was working for. I went forward and continued to learn, and all of those things were challenges for me, but I got beyond them. And listen, what a promotion. Now I was in charge of staffing, business development, and overseeing the financial management of the company. I was doing new things, meeting new people, and each challenge helped me to develop and to grow. I learned about client development and the art of negotiation. I learned to read financial statements and how to talk to accountants. I learned how to hire and train a workforce. I learned to be patient. I'm proud to tell you that the first employee I ever hired still works for that company today. Not bad for a first hire. I did pretty good. As the years went by, things became more routine and comfortable for me. I'm not saying there weren't challenges, there were. What I am saying is by then I had the maturity and the experience to deal with a wide range of business issues. I could look at a situation, apply it to something else, and run with it. I stopped being afraid of what could go wrong, and I started to concentrate on what could go right. I got dressed every morning knowing that, listen, whatever was out there, I would be able to handle it. I wasn't uncomfortable, so I wasn't growing. So I dipped my toes into the unknown again. I went back to school and got a master's degree. I joined professional organizations, including ARMA International. I earned my CRM certification, and I expanded our information management business. Other opportunities, at home, I forgot my at home. At home, I was busy raising 3 kids with my husband. Information technology was plowing ahead, and I was worried about keeping current. I wanted to go back to school for my Ph.D., and I thought, when am I going to find the time? But I did it, and I went forward. Other opportunities started to come my way. An ARMA International chapter asked me to speak at a meeting, and I thought, what if they ask me something I don't know? My mentor said, listen, you tell them you don't know, you're going to get back to them later, and that's exactly what I did. As soon as it was available, I earned my IGP certification. I recently transitioned from being an entrepreneur to the Director of Information Governance at a technology-driven company. I lean in to embrace new challenges in my role, and I'm getting really comfortable at being uncomfortable. My career advice to you is this: every time you have the opportunity to participate, do it. I speak at chapter meetings and conferences. I write for journals and magazines. I serve on standards committees and task forces. I volunteer for the ARMA International Education Foundation, and I grade CRM exams. Each time I participate, I not only challenge myself to do something differently, I also give back. So every time you do anything, in that way you grow. You're doing something new. The hardest part is to sign on. At least once a year, I stop and do a self-evaluation. What have I done well? Where can I improve? And what can I do differently? Based on that self-evaluation, I sync my personal and professional life and have my career evolve. Based on my evaluations, I go forward and I set my goals. I set milestones for myself. Where do I feel uncomfortable? Where can I improve in the next year? At some point, I say to myself, listen, think about the birds. When birds throw their young out of the nest, that's how they learn to fly. My name is Sofia Empel, and every year I'm breaking the path to fearless. I promise to tell you how I am able to step out of my comfort zone, and it's this. Ask yourself as often as you can, what would I do if I wasn't afraid to do it?
Great job, Sofia. I think a powerful message for everybody here, that fearlessness that we need to adopt, and certainly you've seen in your career. One of the themes that came out for me, and I'd like you to speak about this for a second, is you invested early in your career and have continued to invest in understanding the business. Can you tell us about the role that's played in your career and the role it plays today? How important is that?
So, you know, when I went through, and I'm a business owner, and I'm learning the different parts of the business, what it allowed me to do when I was a consultant was to go out, and when I was talking to those clients, to really understand what their perspectives were. You know, when I was going and I was talking to somebody in accounting, I was really understanding what they were talking about, what their record keeping involved, going to human resources. So all of those things added to how I was able to progress. But not only that, when I went out there and I'm talking to them, I'm really listening to what they have to say and kind of taking in more. So the objective is not only to go with what you know, but also to put yourself out there and take something in. And that's how you move one step forward.
That's great advice. And one of the other things you talked about was the importance of getting involved and all the things that you've done with ARMA and other groups to give back. So I'm curious, if for folks that are early career and aren't comfortable speaking, are not at that point yet in their career, how can they get involved in this community and helping to move it forward? What recommendations would you have?
Listen, there are so many things to be involved in. Listen, if speaking's not your thing, teaching's not your thing, that's okay. You could be on a membership committee. You can volunteer to write something. And you shouldn't focus on what you can't do. You should always focus on that part that you can do. So maybe you can't do it to 100%. You do it to 60%. You drive to get the other 20% done. It's not going to be perfect, but next time you're going to move to the next level. So when you're starting out, you don't have to know everything. That's okay. You contribute what you can, and anything that you can contribute is something more than what they have currently.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. Great job. Let's give Sofia a round of applause.